My son yelled at me in front of 22 people at Christmas dinner. Mom, if you want to keep living here, pay the rent like any other tenant or leave. My daughter-in-law mocked me openly, leaning across the crystal glasses with a cold, triumphant smile, whispering for the entire table to hear, "Let's see how you survive out there." What Tyler didn't know was that this 3,500 square foot duplex penthouse overlooking the dark, frozen canopy of Central Park, this pristine sanctuary on Fifth Avenue in New York City, where he constantly boasted about living thanks to his supposedly brilliant career as an architect, was entirely mine. Anger was not loud this time. It was entirely clinical. I looked down at the heavy, silver-plated serving spoon resting in my right hand, still radiating the residual warmth of the roasted turkey I had spent all morning preparing. 22 pairs of eyes stared back at me across the sprawling mahogany table. Uncles, cousins, Tyler's wealthy architectural clients, and Destiny's fashion influencer colleagues, all of them holding their breath, all of them waiting for a pathetic maternal breakdown, waiting for tears that would never come. Destiny maintained her condescending, razor-sharp smirk, slowly swirling her expensive California Zinfandel. Tyler looked away from my gaze, casually adjusting the gleaming gold Rolex watch his wife had bought him using my money, looking utterly satisfied with his own sudden, public display of cruelty. I did not scream. I did not ask him why. I calmly placed the heavy spoon back onto the white marble counter without making a single sound. Reaching behind my waist, I untied the linen apron stained with gravy, folded it into a flawless, precise square, and set it next to my untouched dinner plate. I looked at my only son, seeing a fragile stranger wrapped tightly in privileges he had never actually earned. "Thank you all for coming," I said, my voice completely devoid of tremors, sounding so quiet and controlled that even I was surprised by its stillness. "This Christmas dinner will be the absolute last one I ever spend in this house." I turned around and walked down the long, carpeted hallway toward my bedroom. The sudden, uncomfortable murmurs of the guests and the scraping of expensive chairs echoing behind my back like a retreating tide. Inside my room, the air smelled faintly of dust and old cedar. I pulled out the small, worn suitcase from the back of my closet, the one with the faded tags from a trip to Boston that my late husband, Jeffrey, and I had planned but never got to take before his heart gave out. I packed 3 simple blouses, 2 pairs of pants, and a single thick sweater. I stood in front of the closet mirror, looking at my 64-year-old face, the deep wrinkles around my eyes, and the silver hair pulled tightly into a functional bun. For 3 years straight, I had been the completely silent investor in their fraudulent version of family, funding their illusions while shrinking into the background. I kept wondering, during those long, lonely evenings, what I had ever done wrong to deserve their disdain. Now, as the front door latch clicked shut behind me, the truth arrived with 0-degree clarity. I had been trapped in the modern matrix of maternal enabling. It was a psychological prison, without iron bars, what the textbooks describe as learned helplessness. When a parent loves unconditionally, without establishing rigid boundaries, they inadvertently teach their children that their boundaries and their very humanity do not matter. My bottomless compassion had been a luxury resource they had overdrafted for years, a high-end subscription where I continuously footed the bill while they enjoyed the premium features. Every single time I had swallowed my pride to keep the peace during holidays, I was simply tightening the invisible shackles around my own wrists. But the subscription was officially canceled. I dragged my suitcase through the front foyer, the hard rubber wheels vibrating against the premium oak floor with a low, screeching sound that sliced through their classical background music like a physical blade. The dining room went completely silent once more. Tyler stepped away from the table, his cheeks flushed bright red from the wine, suddenly looking remarkably small without his architectural audience. "Mom, don't be so dramatic," he muttered, trying to project authority while avoiding the eyes of his colleagues. "No one is throwing you onto the street tonight. We are just having a realistic conversation about adult responsibilities." I paused at the threshold, holding my worn leather purse tightly against my chest. "You are completely right, Tyler," I said, looking him dead in the eyes. "It is long overdue for all of us to become realistic adults." The freezing New York night air hit my face as I stepped out onto the concrete pavement of Fifth Avenue. A sleek, black town car was already waiting quietly at the curb, its exhaust venting white plumes into the 0-degree atmosphere. Marcus Vance, the longtime chief operating officer of our family company, stepped out of the driver's seat and took my small bag without asking a single question. He had been Jeffrey's right-hand man for nearly 3 decades, and he knew exactly what transpired the moment he saw my coat. I settled into the quiet leather interior of the back seat, watching the illuminated towers of the city blur past my window in a wash of cold neon. I pulled out my phone, dialed our primary banking representative, and gave a calm, clinical command. Cancel the additional silver credit card ending in 4829. Immediate effect. The $95,000 limit they used to finance their lavish lifestyle disappeared into the digital ether before the car even crossed the Central Park transverse. Everything stayed silent for days, but in my head, their condescending words kept echoing over and over. I didn't hide in a hotel. I went straight to my real home, a modest 8,500 square foot apartment building on the Upper West Side that Jeffrey and I had purchased during our 2nd year of marriage. Tyler had never seen this place. He assumed I lived off his monthly charity, completely unaware that the very foundation of his existence belonged to the mother he had tried to evict. The next morning, I sat across from Marcus Vance behind a massive mahogany desk at the headquarters of Sterling Estates, LLC on Park Avenue. The walls here were lined with the blueprints of our legacy 47 high-end properties conquered dollar by dollar, brick by brick, through 30 years of grueling, invisible labor. Marcus slid the detailed annual accounting ledger across the polished wood, and the stark numbers laid out the true depth of the exploitation. I had allowed my son to believe he was a self-made architectural genius, while his actual salary was only $2,800 a month. The ledger showed that Destiny had spent $95,000 on my primary account in less than 2 quarters. There were lines for $9,500 luxury bags, $847 dinners at multi-star Michelin restaurants, and thousands more spent on premium suites in Miami just to maintain her social media facade. On the corner of my desk sat a cracked photo frame from Tyler's graduation, showing him holding his diploma while I stood blurred in the background, sitting precisely where his honor should have been. It was the ultimate psychological manifestation of the power illusion of an empty wallet. Tyler had confused the special privileges I provided with his own inherent value, never realizing that when you strip away the subsidized cash from a narcissist, the entire identity collapses into absolute nothingness. The professional retaliation was fast, legal, and completely emotionless. I called in Vanessa, our ruthless chief corporate counsel, and instructed her to draft the immediate revocation of the temporary vehicle authorization for the gray Cadillac Tyler drove. He had 48 hours to return the keys to our facility, or we would deploy a corporate tow truck to recover the asset. Next, Vanessa finalized the formal 30-day notice of lease non-renewal for the 5th Avenue penthouse. It was an administrative execution, completely stripped of maternal sentimentality. Tyler had spent his entire adulthood playing the role of the provider while using my resources as his personal sandbox. Now, the sandbox was being emptied. The fallout exploded exactly 48 hours later. Destiny's card was publicly rejected at an elite boutique down on 5th Avenue, shattering her carefully curated influencer status in front of her peers. Within minutes, Tyler bombarded my phone with a cascade of frantic, raging text messages, followed by a call that shook the speakerphone. "Mom, have you completely lost your mind?" He screamed, his voice cracking with unearned panic. "Destiny is hysterical. You are destroying our lives over a stupid joke at dinner. You need to fix this right now." I held the phone away from my ear, feeling nothing but a profound, icy detachment. Anger wasn't loud this time. It was a balance sheet. "You wanted an independent life, Tyler," I said softly. "I am simply giving you the balance statement." I hung up and blocked his number permanently. The next morning, a licensed third-party repossession agency authorized by our legal department arrived at the 5th Avenue building, backed by a flatbed recovery vehicle. Tyler rushed down to the lobby in his pajamas, shouting about his rights, but his jaw went completely slack when Marcus Vance handed him a certified copy of the original corporate property agreement. His signature from 2 years prior was right there at the bottom, clearly marking the Cadillac as temporary company property for business representation purposes only. He dropped the keys into Marcus's palm, his chest heaving with impotent rage, while Destiny watched from behind the glass doors, looking completely exposed as her luxury armor was towed down the street. But the final, lethal discovery occurred later that afternoon when Vanessa conducted a deep forensic audit of our private family trust funds. She called me into the glass-walled conference room, her face completely pale as she brought up a document on the screen. Tyler hadn't just been exploiting my generosity. When the lines of easy credit vanished, he had crossed a dangerous legal boundary. 6 months earlier, a sum of $40,000 had been withdrawn from the private account left by his late father, Jeffrey. The authorization form bore my name, written in what looked like my precise handwriting, but the stroke pressure was entirely wrong, and the loops were too wide. It was a calculated forgery. My own son had committed felony fraud to finance his wife's luxurious lifestyle on the beaches of Florida. The shock didn't break me. It removed any remaining vestige of maternal hesitation. A child who speaks to you with arrogance is a failure of character, but a child who steals from his dead father's legacy is a criminal. I looked at the signature on the screen, remembering the last words Jeffrey whispered to me in the hospital room before his lungs failed. "Laura, don't let our wealth turn our boy into a parasite. Make him earn his place in the dirt." I had broken that promise out of a soft, cowardly desire to see him smile, but I was going to fix it now. "Vanessa," I said, my voice dropping to 0 degrees, "activate the legacy clause immediately." The emergency freeze mandate embedded inside Jeffrey's will was formally filed and processed by the probate court within 24 hours. Tyler was instantly and completely severed from every asset, every future property distribution, and every monetary resource of Sterling Estates, LLC. His inheritance was officially frozen in perpetuity. The clause dictated that he would remain at absolute zero until he could independently design, fund, and construct a high-impact architecture project for the social good of the city, using entirely his own effort without a single dollar or contact from the family empire. I was stripping away his weapons because it was the only way his reconstruction could ever begin. The winter gave way to the brutal, heavy heat of a New York summer, but the lesson continued without interruption. Destiny filed for divorce the exact week his eviction from the Fifth Avenue penthouse became permanent, leaving a note on his packed bags before fleeing back to her parents' cramped suburban house. Stripped of his luxury car, his credit cards, and his elite social circle, Tyler was forced to confront the raw, unadorned truth of his actual earning capacity. He moved into a decaying, 450-square-foot walk-up apartment in a gritty industrial pocket of South Brooklyn, climbing 8 flights of concrete stairs every single night to sleep on a bare mattress on the floor. His real architect's salary of $2,800 left him with exactly $380 a month after paying for basic rent and groceries. He was learning to live in the space of true scarcity. For 6 months straight, I refused every single one of his 47 attempted phone calls, letting Marcus Vance handle the administrative boundaries. Tyler had taken a grueling, low-paying position on a dusty construction site in Staten Island, working under Andrew Villanueva, a hardened builder who had run crews for my husband 30 years ago. Tyler's smooth hands became covered in heavy calluses and deep scars from lifting raw timber and pouring concrete under the summer sun. He stopped drawing luxury high-rises for billionaires. Instead, he spent his exhausting nights on the floor of his South Brooklyn apartment, utilizing a cracked laptop to design a modular, sustainable housing system for low-income families who had been completely pushed out of the housing market. He was finally learning that architecture is built for human dignity, not for personal vanity. The ultimate power flip climax arrived on a rainy Friday morning in August. Tyler had submitted his designs blindly to an open, competitive grant held by an anonymous social impact investment group, with Andrew Villanueva merely acting as his professional reference. He walked into the executive boardroom on the 4th floor of our Park Avenue headquarters, soaking wet from the storm, wearing a $45 suit he had purchased from a thrift store, and clutching a blueprint folder held together by industrial tape. He opened the door, ready to pitch the project of his life, and went completely rigid. Sitting at the head of the oak table, dressed in a sharp charcoal suit with her silver hair perfectly styled, was me. Marcus Vance sat to my right, Vanessa sat to my left. The mother he had tried to humiliate in front of 22 people was the very power that held the key to his survival. Tyler didn't beg for forgiveness, and he didn't play the victim. He took a deep breath, stepped up to the projector, and presented his $18.5 million modular housing initiative with the absolute precision of a master craftsman. He knew every material cost, every supplier risk, and every engineering parameters, because he had lived in the dirt with the workers for 6 months straight. When an executive challenged his narrow margin, Tyler looked him dead in the eye and said, This project isn't built to inflate our wallets. It is built to ensure human beings can sleep with safety. When he finished, he walked to my seat and placed a heavy manila envelope on the wood. Inside is $16,800, he said softly. It is the entirety of my real savings from the construction site, the first installment to repay the legacy I defrauded. I forgive you for letting me fall, Mom. I finally understand. I looked at the envelope, then looked into the eyes of my son. He had finally passed the test. I signed the executive order authorizing the full $18.5 million funding based entirely on the objective merit of his design, not because of his bloodline. He was appointed project director under strict financial supervision, earning his place back into the legacy brick by brick. The concrete structures of the Jeffrey Sterling complex rose toward the sky over the next year, transforming an abandoned lot into a thriving community for 120 low-income families. Destiny was completely gone from the luxury grid, now trapped in a gray cubicle at a telemarketing call center, churlishly reading scripts to angry customers just to make her minimum debt payments. Watching Tyler stand in the courtyard, guiding a young student named Luke Smith over a set of architectural blueprints, I knew my calculated, ruthless lesson had worked perfectly. I had planted the seeds for a future of true accountability. Looking back on this entire journey from the silence of my Upper West Side balcony, I have come to realize a profound psychological truth. Boundaryless love that insulates a child from consequences is never true affection. It is a form of emotional cowardice that feeds their narcissism while destroying their soul. If you find yourself right now trapped in a toxic family dynamic where your invisible care is treated like a transactional ATM, you must find the courage to step away. You do not owe your life, your labor, or your mental peace to people simply because you share their DNA. True family shows up, sacrifices, and respects your boundaries. Stretching away the unearned privileges from those who abuse your kindness is the most profoundly loving thing you can do for them and for yourself. It is not malice, it is accounting. Forgiveness does not require you to remain a doormat. Sometimes, the ultimate act of dignity is to close that door permanently, let the laws of reality handle their correction, and build a beautiful, luminous future entirely on your own terms. If this story opened your eyes to the power of setting boundaries and choosing self-respect over toxic blood ties, hit that share button, subscribe to our community, and drop an accountability in the comments below. Let's build a future of real dignity together.